June 3rd, 1948, 3:17 in the morning. The basement of the Lenox Lounge on 125th Street in Harlem. Through a crack in the door, two of Bumpy Johnson's security men see something that should mean instant death. Marcus the Professor Williams, the man who's handled every dollar, every bank account, every secret transaction for the past 8 years, is sitting at a table with two FBI agents. Between them, an open ledger, 8 years of financial records. 2.3 million names, addresses, bank accounts, payoffs to cops, politicians, judges, everything. The enforcers know what happens next. In Bumpy Johnson's world, betrayal like this has only one ending. By 3:42 a.m., 8 armed men surround that basement room, weapons drawn, waiting for the word. When Bumpy Johnson walks down those stairs and sees his accountant, his trusted professor, giving everything to the feds, every man in that hallway expects immediate execution. But Bumpy looks at the scene, Marcus sweating, the agents confident, the ledger open, and he says 2 words that shock everyone present: not yet. What happened in the next hour would turn an FBI operation into a weapon, save a man's life, destroy Bumpy's biggest rival, and prove once again why Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson was the most dangerous man in Harlem. Not because of violence, because of his mind. Before we dive deeper into this story, if you want more untold legends like this, subscribe to Legends Unspoken right now. Hit that like button if you believe intelligence beats violence every time. And drop a comment. Would you have done what Bumpy did? Now, let's get into it. To understand what happened that night, you need to know who Bumpy Johnson was in 1948. At 42 years old, Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson sat at the peak of his power. He controlled Harlem's numbers racket, an illegal lottery that generated an estimated $100 million annually. But this wasn't just organized crime. In 1948, Harlem, the numbers racket, was economic resistance. Black Americans, shut out of banks, denied loans, excluded from legitimate business, had created their own financial system. And Bumpy Johnson protected it. He'd survived assassination attempts, prison sentences, and the Dutch Schultz Wars of the 1930s. He'd negotiated with the Italian mafia families as an equal. Lucky Luciano respected him. Vito Genovese feared him. The NYPD couldn't buy him. His nickname, the Professor, came from his reputation for reading Voltaire and Machiavelli, speaking multiple languages and preferring strategy over violence. While other criminals ruled through fear, Bumpy ruled through intelligence. But there was a problem, and it wore a federal badge. J. Edgar Hoover's FBI had declared war on black organized crime in Harlem. Not to stop crime, to transfer it. The FBI wanted the numbers record taken from black operators and handed to the Italian mob. The official reason? Professional law enforcement. The real reason? Institutional racism and the desire to destroy black economic independence. By June 1948, that war had reached a critical moment. 3 weeks earlier, May 15, 1948, FBI New York Field Office, downtown Manhattan. Special agent in charge Edward Scheit approved an operation with a budget of $50,000. Operation Financial Exposure. The target wasn't Bumpy Johnson. The target was his accountant. Marcus, the Professor Williams, had worked for Bumpy since 1940. Howard University accounting degree. Family man, 2 young children, non-violent. The FBI had been watching him for months. They'd identified his routine, his weaknesses, his pressure points, and they'd found the perfect leverage. His wife, Helen. The FBI's strategy was elegant in its cruelty. They wouldn't try to buy Marcus. Bumpy's people couldn't be bought. They wouldn't threaten him directly. He'd go straight to Bumpy for protection. Instead, they'd take something he couldn't protect on his own, his family. May 27, 1948, 3:45 in the afternoon. Helen Williams walked out of PS 194 Elementary School on 144th Street after picking up her children. 2 FBI agents approached. They showed badges. Federal Material Witness Warrant. Helen was driven to a federal detention facility in Lower Manhattan, held in a cold cell on the 3rd floor, and told she faced 20 years in prison for conspiracy to launder criminal proceeds. The charges were fabricated. The evidence was doctored bank records. But Helen Williams didn't know that. She was a schoolteacher's wife, a church-going mother, a woman with no criminal record who suddenly found herself in a federal cell, terrified she'd never see her children again. 2 days later, May 29th, 10:30 at night, 2 FBI agents visited Marcus Williams at his home. They didn't say much. They just drove him downtown and showed him his wife through a window. 3rd floor. Cell Block 3. Then they made their offer. Complete cooperation. Every ledger, every bank account, every name, every address, testimony, and a grand jury. And in exchange, Helen walks free. They gave him 72 hours to decide. Marcus Williams, looking at his wife in a federal cell, believing she'd die there if he refused, broke at 2:15 in the morning on May 30th. He agreed. The meeting was set for June 3rd, 3 a.m. Lenox Lounge basement, chosen specifically because it was Bumpy's territory. Meeting there would prove Marcus could access the inner circle. Marcus was instructed to bring complete financial records. The FBI planned to freeze every account immediately, indict over 200 network members, seize properties, and build a case that would destroy Bumpy's entire operation. By June 2nd, everything was in place. The trap was perfect. Or so they thought. What the FBI didn't know, what nobody except a handful of people knew, was that Bumpy Johnson's intelligence network was more sophisticated than the federal government's. He had informants in places the FBI never considered. Not mob bosses or corrupt cops, janitors, clerks, maintenance workers, people institutions ignore, people who are invisible. And one of those invisible people worked in the federal. May 28th, 11:30 at night, less than 36 hours after Helen Williams was arrested. Bumpy Johnson received a phone call. Helen Williams. Federal detention. Cell Block 3. Material witness warrant. No charges filed. Being held as leverage. Bumpy immediately understood. They weren't going after him directly. They were going after Marcus. And Marcus, faced with an impossible choice, would break. Any man would. But Bumpy Johnson didn't panic. He didn't confront Marcus. He didn't make threats. Instead, he did what he always did. He thought 3 moves ahead. At 1 a.m. on May 29th, while the FBI was preparing to approach Marcus, Bumpy held an emergency meeting with Stephanie St. Clair, his business partner and mentor in the numbers racket. Madam Queen, they called her. Together, they made a decision. Assume Marcus is compromised. Begin financial reorganization and prepare something special. What happened over the next 72 hours was a masterclass in counterintelligence. While Marcus was agonizing over his impossible choice, while the FBI was preparing their trap, Bumpy Johnson was executing a plan so sophisticated it wouldn't be fully understood until months later. First, the money. $2.3 million. Bumpy had 36 hours before Marcus would likely agree to cooperate. He couldn't confront Marcus without revealing his intelligence network. So instead, he quietly moved the money. New accounts. Different banks. Carver Federal Savings. Dunbar National Bank. Black-owned institutions that could move quickly without questions. Shell companies. Trusted associates' names. By June 1st, every account Marcus knew about had been emptied or closed. Minimum balances left. Enough to look legitimate, small enough to be acceptable losses. Second, the network. Bumpy briefed his runner network on new collection points. He told them it was a routine security update. Nobody questioned it. Bumpy updated payoff schedules. New payment methods. New drop locations. By June 2nd, Marcus Williams's knowledge was 72 hours out of date. But the third move was genius. Bumpy Johnson personally created a fake ledger. He had samples of Marcus's handwriting. He knew Marcus's bookkeeping format. He had access to identical ledger books. And over 2 days, working 16-hour shifts, Bumpy created a document that looked like 8 years of authentic financial records. Same handwriting, same format. Real dates. Real locations. But filled with false information. Bank accounts that didn't exist. Runner names of people who'd left, payoff schedules for cops who'd retired, cash houses at abandoned addresses. It was a perfect forgery. Almost perfect. Because embedded in that ledger, on pages 47 through 63, Bumpy Johnson planted a poison pill. Detailed records of heroin trafficking through the Cotton Club, money laundering through specific restaurants on 116th Street, payoffs to judges and politicians. But here's the beautiful part. None of it was Bumpy's operation. It was all real intelligence about his biggest rival, Vito Genovese's lieutenant, Carmine Persico, who'd been trying to muscle into Harlem for years. The ledger made it look like Persico was Bumpy's partner, which meant when the FBI investigated, and Bumpy knew they would investigate thoroughly, they'd be building a case against the Genovese family, while thinking they were investigating Bumpy Johnson. On June 2nd, Bumpy planted the fake ledger where Marcus could steal it. He positioned his security team to discover the FBI meeting. Everything was in place. The FBI thought they were running an operation against Bumpy Johnson. Bumpy was running an operation against them. June 3rd, 3:17 a.m. Right on schedule, Bumpy's security spotted the meeting. Two men immediately called Bumpy at his residence, 409 Edgecombe Avenue, the famous Sugar Hill building where Thurgood Marshall and Duke Ellington also lived. The message was simple. Professor's in the basement with them. He's got the books. Bumpy arrived at 3:42 a.m., 25 minutes. Time to assess, time to plan. By then, 8 of his enforcers surrounded the basement room. The atmosphere was murderous. Everyone in Bumpy's organization understood what betrayal meant, especially betrayal by someone who knew everything. Several men had weapons drawn. Bumpy's lieutenant, a man they called Big George, 6'4", 240 pounds, absolutely loyal, spoke what everyone was thinking. Give the word, Bumpy. We'll handle this. All 3 of them. The suggestion to eliminate federal agents demonstrated how seriously they viewed this threat. It would mean federal heat. It would mean investigations. But protecting the organization was worth it. Bumpy walked down the basement stairs. The room fell silent. Through the door, he could see Marcus Williams sitting at a table, sweating, terrified. 2 FBI agents, hands moving toward their service weapons, Marcus's finger pointing to entries. And Bumpy said, "Not yet." The room erupted. "Not yet?" Big George repeated, confused. "Bumpy, he's got everything. 8 years of records. He's giving us all to them right now." Bumpy raised one hand. Silence. He walked into the room, directly toward Marcus and the agents. His body language wasn't threatening. He was calm, almost conversational. He spoke directly to Marcus, his voice quiet. "How's Helen doing in that federal cell downtown, Marcus?" Marcus's face went white. The FBI agents exchanged glances. How did Bumpy know? Bumpy continued, his tone measured. "Cell block 3, 3rd floor, detained as a material witness. They picked her up Tuesday afternoon, 3:45 p.m., outside the children's school. Told you they'd give her 20 years unless you cooperated." One FBI agent recovered his composure. "Mr. Johnson, you're interfering with a federal investigation." "Sit down, agent," Bumpy interrupted, still calm. "We're all going to have a conversation." He turned back to Marcus. "I have to compliment you, gentlemen. Using a man's wife, that's effective. Problem is, I knew about Helen's detention 36 hours ago, which means I've had 36 hours to rearrange things." He pointed to the ledger on the table. "Every account in that book, emptied or closed. Every runner, new collection points. Every address, abandoned or changed. You're looking at 8 years of records that are 72 hours out of date." The senior FBI agent's face hardened. "You're bluffing, Johnson. We've got corroborating evidence, surveillance." "No, you don't." Bumpy cut him off. "But you're about to get something better. See, Marcus didn't know I gave him that ledger. He flipped to a specific page, right here. $50,000 monthly payments to Detective Richard Morrison of the 28th Precinct. Except Morrison retired in 1946. This ledger says payments continued through 1948. He flipped another page. Here. Runner collections at 447 West 145th Street. That building's been condemned since 1945. The FBI agents leaned forward despite themselves. Where was this going? "But this is the good part," Bumpy continued, his voice taking on an edge. Pages 47 through 63. Detailed records of heroin trafficking through the Cotton Club, money laundering through Gino's restaurant on 116th. Payoffs to Judge William Donnelly. Problem is, none of that's my operation. He let that sink in. That's Vito Genovese's lieutenant, Carmine Persico, running drugs in Harlem. But according to this ledger, he's my partner. Which means when you investigate those entries, and they'll check out because they're real, you're going to think you're investigating me. But you'll actually be building a case against the Genovese family. The room went silent. You could hear the distant jazz music from upstairs, the hiss of the radiator, Marcus's heavy breathing. The FBI agents were beginning to understand they'd been played. Bumpy straightened up. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to take that ledger. You're going to investigate every entry. And in about 6 months, you're going to indict somebody, just not me. In the meantime, you're going to release Helen Williams tonight, and you're going to leave Marcus alone." The senior agent's jaw tightened. "And if we don't, then I make a phone call." Bumpy said simply, and by morning the New York Times has photographs of FBI agents kidnapping a woman to coerce her husband into bearing false witness. How do you think that plays with the courts when you try to use this ledger as evidence? Silence. The agents realized their entire operation had been compromised from the start. The ledger they thought was their victory was actually a trap that would lead them to investigate Bumpy's rivals instead. The senior agent closed the ledger slowly. "We'll need to verify." "You do that?" Bumpy interrupted. "But Helen Williams walks out of detention in the next 2 hours, or we've got nothing to talk about." He finally turned to Marcus, who had tears streaming down his face. "You should have come to me, Professor. You think I don't have lawyers who can handle a material witness warrant? You think I don't have judges who owe me favors? You think I'd let Helen do 1 day in a real prison?" Marcus's voice broke. "They said if I talked to you, they'd add 20 years. "They lied," Bumpy said gently. "They always lie. That's what you need to understand about them." He turned to leave, pausing at the door. "Gentlemen, I expect confirmation that Helen is released by 6 a.m. Marcus, you're coming with me. We have accounts to update. The real ones." He walked out. His men followed. The FBI agents sat in stunned silence, realizing they'd been outmaneuvered by a man they'd underestimated. At 5:47 a.m., 13 minutes before Bumpy's deadline, Helen Williams walked out of federal detention, confused but free. Marcus remained in Bumpy's organization, though in a diminished capacity. Bumpy trusted him personally, understood the impossible choice he'd faced, but couldn't have him handling sensitive information after FBI contact. Marcus was reassigned to managing legitimate businesses. He worked for Bumpy until Bumpy went to Alcatraz in 1952, but the real consequences took longer to unfold. The FBI did exactly what Bumpy predicted. They investigated the ledger thoroughly. By December 1948, 6 months later, exactly as Bumpy had calculated, federal indictments came down. Carmine Persico and 3 Genovese family associates, heroin trafficking, money laundering, judicial corruption. The investigation revealed actual crimes by the Italian mob, while the FBI thought they were investigating Bumpy Johnson. The indictments created chaos in the Genovese family. Other mob families blamed them for attracting federal attention. Italian mob expansion into Harlem was delayed by 3 to 4 years due to federal scrutiny. The FBI agents involved in Operation Financial Exposure were quietly reassigned. Internal FBI memos from early 1949, declassified decades later, note increased caution about intelligence operations against Subject Johnson, recognizing his counterintelligence capabilities that rivaled their own. But the story's real impact was on Bumpy Johnson's legend. Within 24 hours, word spread through Harlem. Bumpy had known about the FBI trap before it was sprung. He'd reorganized his entire financial empire in 72 hours. He'd created a fake ledger that turned an FBI operation into a weapon against his rivals. And he'd saved Marcus Williams, shown mercy when violence was expected, because he understood the difference between betrayal by choice and betrayal by coercion. In barbershops and bars, on street corners and in church basements, Harlemites told the story with pride. Bumpy always knows. He protects his own. The Professor, his nickname gained new meaning. He'd literally outthought the FBI. Law enforcement approached Bumpy investigations differently after that. Traditional pressure tactics, threats, coercion, family leverage were recognized as ineffective. Some agents developed grudging respect. Declassified FBI memos use phrases like sophisticated criminal intelligence and countermeasures exceed typical organized crime awareness. In organized crime circles, Italian mob bosses recognized Bumpy as a peer-level strategic thinker, not just a territorial operator. The incident reinforced non-aggression pacts. Attacking Bumpy was too unpredictable, too dangerous. Younger black criminals in Harlem learned a lesson that night. Intelligence defeats violence. Strategy beats force. Information is power. And by protecting the numbers racket from FBI seizure, Bumpy preserved black economic infrastructure for another decade. The numbers racket continued funding black businesses, churches, community organizations through the 1950s. When Bumpy went to Alcatraz in 1952, the delayed Italian mob takeover meant Harlem had more time to develop alternative economic structures. This story reveals something essential about Bumpy Johnson. His power didn't come from violence. It came from understanding human psychology. Marcus wasn't a traitor. He was a father in an impossible position. The FBI weren't all-powerful. They were bureaucrats with assumptions and blind spots. His rivals weren't invincible. They had real crimes that could be documented and exposed. Bumpy Johnson saw what others missed. He had informants in places and he planned multiple moves ahead. He turned defensive situations into offensive opportunities. He valued loyalty earned through protection, not fear. And he understood something that most people miss. Real power isn't controlling people through violence. It's making them choose loyalty because you've proven you'll protect them. The FBI had unlimited resources, federal authority, the power to destroy families. But they didn't have what Bumpy Johnson had. A network of people loyal because he protected them. An intelligence operation that outmatched theirs. And strategic thinking that turned any attack into a counterattack. Marcus Williams worked for Bumpy until Bumpy's imprisonment in 1952. The false ledger operation became legendary, a story told for decades, a lesson that survives to this day. Don't come for Bumpy unless you're prepared for him to already know you're coming. And by the time you realize he knows, he's already 3 moves ahead. This was just one night in June 1948, but it crystallized everything that made Bumpy Johnson the most dangerous man in Harlem. Not his weapons, not his enforcers, not his territory, his mind. In a world that often values aggression and immediate response, Bumpy Johnson proved that real power belongs to those who think ahead, who understand human nature, who turn disadvantages into advantages, who protect their people, who win without violence whenever possible, and with strategy when necessary. Bumpy Johnson lived another 20 years after that night. He went to Alcatraz in 1952, served 11 years, and returned to Harlem in 1963. He died in 1968. Not from violence, but from a heart attack. But this story, this one night in June 1948, this story proved what true power looks like. The most dangerous person in any room isn't the one ready to fight. It's the one who already knows what everyone else is going to do. If this story gave you chills, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to Legends Unspoken, because we're telling the stories they don't teach in history books. Stories of intelligence, strategy, and power that changed history. Drop a comment. Would you have done what Bumpy did? Turn on notifications because next time we're telling the story of how Bumpy Johnson walked into an impossible meeting with Lucky Luciano and made the most powerful mob boss in America stand down without firing a single shot. You don't want to miss that. Remember, in Harlem, respect wasn't given. It was earned, and Bumpy Johnson earned his every single day.